Hi, everyone, and welcome to Around the Ladder. I'm Erika Steinberg. Our careers are supposed to make sense, right? You move forward, you build your experience, and then when you look back, there's a clear through line. At least that's the idea. But what if your path doesn't look like that? What if it feels more like a series of experiments or unexpected turns, and only later you realize that none of it was random? My guest today, Matt Plavnick, did not follow a traditional path. He spent years exploring. He was teaching, writing, he even spent time in Antarctica before ever stepping into a corporate environment when he was in his mid 30s. And even then, his career didn't follow a straight line. What's interesting to me now is how he makes sense of it and how those experiences, ones that might look disconnected on paper, actually became the foundation for the work that he does today. So, our conversation today is about trusting experiences that don't seem to fit yet and what it looks like to build a career that may only really come together in hindsight. Matt, I am so glad that we're doing this. Welcome. I'm glad that I didn't flub the introduction a second time. So,
Thank you. You did great. I'm excited to be here and to talk, Erica.
thank you. Thank you. So, I have so many questions for you. It's a very long list. I'm going to do my best to go through them, but one of the you and I talk pretty frequently, and one of the times when we were talking about you coming on Around the Ladder, you said something that I loved, that your career is basically a series of happy accidents. So I wanted to start with that. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's very funny when I think back on it. I think the phase of my career that I'm in actually started in 2008. 2008, when I returned, my wife and I had lived in Oaxaca, Mexico for a year. She was finishing graduate school and doing a practicum there. We came back to the States, specifically Denver, without a plan, and without a lot in place. And a friend of mine recommended that I talk to her company because they were hiring, and she had been encouraged to go find some people in her network she thought would do a great job. I had that interview and it went great. And the hiring manager called me to offer me a job. And I started asking about benefits. And she said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I feel like you think this is a full-time job. This is full-time contract. We can offer you 40 hours a week, but after that, there's nothing built in. And I accepted the work and I hung up and I turned to my wife and I said, I think I just went into business for myself. And I think I better find some more clients. And against all odds, I did. And I was very happy. And I was building a freelance career as a writer and editor, which is what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to make writing part of my professional life. And it was paying well enough that we weren't worried about cash flow. The only reason I left that after 2.5 years was because we had a baby during that time. My wife had a job with benefits for our family. It was awful. It turned worse for her. It was toxic. And after maternity leave, the black cloud hanging over us was intolerable and excruciating. And she wouldn't leave that job because we had our first child and Obamacare wasn't live yet. We couldn't just go on the exchange and get our own health care. And it was clear to me that if I wanted her to leave that job, I had to find a job that would provide us with benefits. So I looked around saying, well, where can I be a writer and editor? Where can I be a little bit of a journalist? Where can I do some storytelling? And I was very comfortable working with subject matter experts by that time. And I found a law firm proposal writing job. And I didn't know anything about working with lawyers or in law firms, but I thought this sounds okay. And like you mentioned, I was 34 years old before I set foot under the fluorescent lights of a corporate office environment. It happened to be a law firm. That was in 2010. And here we are in 2026, a fun, rich, rewarding path from there to here.
Yeah. When you were in this, the the part that, the happy accidents part, did it feel like, was it uncomfortable? Was it exciting? Was it a mix of both? Like, what did that time feel like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I knew enough to be uncomfortable. I never had career ambitions. Truly. I graduated from college at 22. I moved from Michigan to Utah to work out west in the desert. I was a wilderness guide for at-risk youth for several years. I picked Utah because my brother was there already. I always assumed I would move to the mountains, but I didn't. I probably Colorado had my brother not been in Utah. But he said, "Why don't you come try Utah?" And we worked for a couple of years in the central desert there, and I fell in love with the desert. Um, from there, I spent time in Colorado. I moved to Washington for a brief spell, moved to Montana for 2.5 years and really loved Bozeman, Montana. Um, and picked different places for, once I moved for the job of being a wilderness guide, once I moved to follow a woman and see what did we really have. And by the time I went to Montana, I said, I've moved for the job and the girl, I'm going to go for the place. And Montana had this lore and allure to it.
Yeah.
And especially because I had been living in the West and working with Western mountain type folks, Montana really stood out. I'd been reading Jim Harrison for years by that time. And it was wonderful. It was everything I hoped it could be. And then I left it after 2.5 years. It was clear to me that time was done. Um, and I left it to do more traveling. I volunteered with a nonprofit that was teaching HIV/AIDS awareness and prevention in Malawi, in Africa.
Hmm.
And I traveled in Malawi and Zambia and Mozambique for a season. And it was during that time that I got myself a contract job in Antarctica because
That's my favorite one.
Wilderness Friends again knew about these jobs. And before I went to Africa, I knew I wanted to keep traveling, but I needed to get paid. And so Antarctica came up for me. It had been on the back burner for some time, and it was the right time to come to the front burner. I share all of that because it was in Antarctica that I met my wife, and everything changed after that. Now we were making decisions together, and we had to try and figure out what was what. She went to graduate school after Antarctica. I followed her there. We tried to make a go. We were going to make a go of following her career as it developed after she got her graduate degree. And things weren't coming together in the markets where she wanted. And one day, very frustrated, we were on a hike in Oaxaca, Mexico, outside of Oaxaca in this village. And we were on this hike near a waterfall and not talking to each other very much because we were both really stressed out. We were fatigued from having been in a country where we don't speak the language well. We were both communicating okay, but it was fatiguing to be in Oaxaca after 10 months. She said to me halfway through our lunch break, she said, "What if we moved for lifestyle?" Up until that point, she had been trying to network for, health policy, which is what she was studying, women's health policy. We were talking about lining up jobs. We were looking at, major metro cities. And it just wasn't coming together and we were running out of money. She said, "What if we moved for lifestyle?" And it's like the clouds cleared and we could hear the celestial music. And we both knew we would come back to Colorado as soon as she said that. And that everything changed in that moment. And coming back to Colorado was great. That's the context that I had behind me from ages 22 to 31 or 32
Yeah.
by the time we came back to Colorado, probably 31. And then I lucked into my full-time, not a full-time job
Yeah.
where I went into business for myself and I was successful against all odds. So when you ask, did it feel uncomfortable? I didn't know enough to feel uncomfortable. I was like, oh, that's unexpected. I guess I better find more clients. And then I did, and I was doing writing and editing and quality control for online academic organizations, higher ed. I got a job with a higher ed organization, university, which was great. So so I don't know. I didn't know any different. I didn't get uncomfortable until I was approaching that first law firm. Because then for the first time, I'm like, how am I supposed to act around all these lawyers? We have lawyers on both sides of our families, but I didn't think much of it. People thought I would go to law school at different times in my life. People have suggested lawyering in law school, but my mom also suggested I be a mailman. So take it with a grain of salt. She just wanted me to have steady benefits. Take it with a grain of salt.
Pension, good pension.
Yeah, exactly. So early on there had been talk of law school and lawyering, but it was never something I wanted. It was a suggestion. When I got a law firm job, I think everybody in my family, I was 34, and they were like, "Phew, okay, Matt's going to do this for a minute. Then he'll get excited about law school. Then he'll go be a lawyer and we don't have to worry about him. And I'm like, you
Oh,
people still don't know me, do you?
yeah.
I just want to tell these stories. And much to my surprise, I ended up in law firms and I discovered people really appreciate great writing, critical thinking, and good storytelling. The subject matter is endlessly fascinating to me. And the lawyers don't want to do what I do. I don't want to do what they do. They don't want to do what I do. And the best part of it was every day I came to work and somebody gave me new work. After 2.5 years as a freelancer, I didn't have to go find my own work.
Yeah.
So to go back to the idea of happy accidents, when I left my successful freelancing, I thought for sure I was walking into a series of corporate frustrations. And that is not what happened at.
That's so wonderful. I love that. I love that because I was wondering, like, did you feel, like as you were walking into this corporate environment for the first time at age 34, did you feel behind compared to people? In comparison can really get under your skin. But after hearing you tell this story, it feels to me like you were just living your life. Like I'm living my life and I'm
Yeah.
going in and making decisions that make sense in the moment and really being present in each moment. And so it doesn't feel like any of it was accidental or behind or a wrong move or, too circuitous a path. It feels like everything just kind of lined up to bring you where you were supposed to be.
Honestly, I don't think I've ever felt behind. I didn't have a place that I was trying to get to clearly. By the time
That
we
I think
moved,
that's the magic word. You didn't have a place. I think it's when we put this
yeah,
imposition on ourselves, like I am supposed to be here. If you
yeah.
don't have that thought, then you're not behind.
It was not drilled into me as a kid. I think, yeah, I will be honest. I graduated high school with a 2.7 GPA. My mom worried about whether I would get into college. She was threatening me with, if you need to live at home and pay rent and go to community college for a couple of years and get your grades up before you go to a university, then you can and that was not the case, by the way. I got into college. I got into two colleges, both of the ones I applied for. Only one person has ever asked me where I went to school. He was kind of a jerk, and it was only when I got to a law firm and he was an old school Ivy League pedigree driven lawyer who, as we were getting to know each other, he said, "So where'd you go to school?" In that way.
Yeah.
That's the only time in my life I've ever encountered that. But I never felt behind. By the time I figured out what I wanted to be, Erika, I wanted to be a poet and a novelist and have a writing life. And the first thing you realize, if that's what you want, is that you're always going to be behind. So you stop counting. You stop, the fact that I was finding ways to get paid for writing, editing, articles, journalism, any of it was shocking to me. I thought I was ahead. I thought I was ahead.
Yeah.
So
So then with that, I was going to ask you, how did stepping into a corporate environment for the first time in your mid 30s shape how you approached work? But I think you just answered that because of your mindset leading up to this and probably throughout your life that you felt like you were ahead. So that was, is there anything else there? You
it's
have the
stepping
look on your
into,
face. Like I could tell the wheels are
yeah,
spinning. You're having thoughts.
they are spinning because I had to give some things up. I had to give up some autonomy when I went into a law firm, and my sense of drive was strong. By that time I had finished a draft of a novel that I was eager to get out. It's still a draft. I've been through it 4 times. It's still not ready for prime time. But the fact that I had written it and had brought it into the world between the hours of like 4 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. in the mornings, before my oldest daughter was born and before I did my writing and editing work for the day,
Mhm.
meant that I had this investment in myself and in the career I thought I was going to realize. Switching gears into parenting and into working in a law firm in order to support our family now that we were parents really made me reprioritize because what I found was that I kept trying to be a writer while I was working in a law firm marketing department, and I was angry all the time. I was parenting and we weren't getting enough sleep. Um, and I just wanted the kid to go to bed every night at a certain time. And then before you know it, we're parenting. We've got two kids, and I just want them to go to sleep. I want to be able to shift gears and go back to I wanted to go to bed so I could keep waking up early to write, but I needed more sleep and it was constantly interrupted. Then I was going to law firms and doing their deadline driven work under intense pressure, and I loved the environment. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later because I think law firms offer way more creative space than anyone expects from the
Yeah.
outside looking in. I loved it. I really, really loved it, but it was taxing and draining. And so between parenting and going into that corporate environment, I, I just found I couldn't keep writing. I was too angry because I thought the rest of the world had to stop at certain times so that I could get my sleep or so that I could transition back to editing mode at the computer at night or drafting mode in the morning. The world doesn't work like that when you're a parent
No.
and when you're working with lawyers. It took me a few years to adjust, like to make peace with that. I resisted it for a long time. Um, and when I finally made peace with it and let go of wanting to finish that novel, I felt happier. I still hold a dream of returning to a full-time writing life, and a lot of my work allows me to do some of that, but I don't write poetry and fiction anymore. And I'm not doing articles for hire. So I had to give that up.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the creativity in law firms because I feel like, especially now, and especially over the last several years, the art of storytelling has become so much more valued in law firms. And so I do find that creative outlet. My entire career has been, working with lawyers and law firms. And I do feel like I'm being creative. I feel like I'm being creative
Yeah.
in my work. I feel like I'm being creative in how I run my business now.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. There's more than you think that there is.
I want to agree with your statement that there's more appreciation for storytelling while challenging the premise a little bit. And I arrived on the scene in 2010, so it's not like I go back 25 years. But I don't, in my mind, I have always found that storytelling is at a premium in law firms. And I've been in two. I've been in a 500 lawyer full service and law 200 firm. And
Hmm.
I've been in a national litigation boutique with 120 lawyers playing at a very high level. And in both, storytelling was appreciated. I think I think that that culture of appreciation for excellent storytelling has been there because lawyers tend to think of themselves as excellent storytellers, especially when you get into litigation, where I spent over a decade, and maybe a couple other pockets. But litigators, they're trained, and high trial lawyers in particular are
Yeah.
trained in framing stories, delivering stories, and the art of the story for juries and judges. So, so what I have seen a shift, this is the part I definitely agree with. Um, I've seen a shift in the use of the word storyteller. I've seen job postings with storyteller in it or storytelling in it. I've heard lawyers talk openly about wanting that role for their firms. And that's a ton of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I didn't think about the language that people, the language that people are using. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
That's at least how I've come into contact with it. And even before I was in a litigation boutique, I was working with litigators and trial lawyers to help them on pitches and proposals and business development. So
Yeah. So I want to return to your path, because we were talking about. I remember one time we were talking. You mentioned something that struck me. That you said that you found that companies often hire based on a formula instead of what actually makes someone effective. Um, and then I wanted to talk about like where people with unconventional backgrounds possibly have an advantage, like where that gap in your resume
yeah,
that somebody might
yeah,
ask you about is
yeah.
actually something that is we should celebrate it rather than try to describe it away.
Well, it's interesting. I think you use the word companies. I think that's broadly true. I think we're all looking for shortcuts to help us in our decision making. And so we look for signs and signals that people will perform certain ways. The legal industry has been reckoning with this for as long as I've been in it, for 16 years. And well before that, there was a shift away from, by the time I arrived at the litigation boutique, they were openly saying we need to move away from pedigree because too many of those lawyers are not working out for us, and we're replacing our
Interesting.
talent far too often, even though we're going out and hiring those who should be the best and the brightest, but and they say they want what we're doing, but then they get here and it's not the right fit for them. So we need to go out and find the people who really are feeling the flame in their center to do this
Hmm.
hard litigation and trial work, and pedigree alone is not telling us that. So I was in a law firm that shifted from experience based, like sort of looking at experience and personality traits and do I like you, to, really behavior based interviewing methods to understand how will you function when we are in this scenario together, when you are faced with this. And I was responsible for helping change the language we were using externally to talk to the market about how did we hire the people that our clients were going to come work with eventually. Um, when it comes to my career, this is a really it's I I think 2.5 years of successful entrepreneurship before I ever meant to start a business helped me understand a couple of things that the market was hungry for. I knew that subject matter experts needed help telling their stories to the general populace because I had been working with physics instructors. I had been working with naturopathic medicine practitioners. I worked with a dermatologist. I worked with small business owners who really knew their fundamental product and service offering, but didn't know what the audience wanted to hear to buy their offering. So I found myself in this marketing role before I knew I was doing marketing. Another happy accident,
Yeah.
right? I was an English major with a creative writing and a literature degree. I do not have a marketing degree or a business degree. What I found was that I was getting paid to help be the marketing layer in a sense between what the sellers wanted to say and what the buyers wanted to hear,
Yeah.
whoever my audience was. And that was very powerful. Um, as a result of that time I spent, it became really, it was part of my core service offering, um, to pitch all of what I was doing as value adds. I wasn't using that language at the time, but I didn't see a gap in my resume. I saw storytelling credentials in my work in Africa, in my work in Oaxaca, in my work in Antarctica, right? And so it wasn't until it was my second law firm where the law firm director, I was hired by the director herself. At that point, she had come from the marketing side and was now the executive director of the law firm and still holding on to the marketing and BD hat, and she needed help. She said, I have to ask you this because I know HR will ask me. So there is a gap in your resume. What were you doing? And I don't even remember. I think it was something between 2004 and 2007, or maybe it was between before that. But I said, I here's what I was doing. I was like living in a cabin in Montana on 80 acres at the mouth of the Bridger Canyon, and I was working in restaurants and I was writing poetry, and I was traveling around and living and going where the wind took me. And I think I was learning to be a professional writer and storyteller at that time, but you won't see that on my resume.
And what did she
So
say?
she said, "Thank you. That's a good explanation for the gap." And I tied it to marketing communications and business development. because that was what I knew the firm was looking for. They were looking for somebody to help them get their proposals out and get their website language updated and help create the new products and new expressions that the market wanted to consume.
Yeah.
Because the things that the lawyers wanted to say had sort of lost their luster. They were going from first gen to second gen, and they were seeding third gen already. And it was like we needed new expressions to go with new leadership.
Hmm.
And that the market reflected that too.
Yeah. So then you're in a law firm, you're in the law firm world. You told me there was one time where you were at, and I don't know if it was at one of these two firms, where you were at a job where you would solve the problem that you were there to solve, and then you knew it was time to go.
Uh, I don't remember using that language. I left
Maybe that was the
once.
note that I wrote.
Yeah. I don't think of it that way. That's like a very admirable trait in somebody else who is much more eager for adventure and much more risk open than I am. I'm pretty risk averse. And
Really?
really, I spent 10 and a half years at my second law firm because I loved it so much and found such a good fit and did not think the grass was greener anywhere else. I finally left because I was too young to coast to retirement, and I wasn't sure how I was going to keep growing if I stayed there, just because we were all too reliable to each other. They were never going to let me fall on my face. There was never real risk for me, so I wasn't growing. I mean, I could try something new and it could fall flat, but I had built up the goodwill and we all had excellent relationships and I just didn't see the potential to grow in the ways I wanted, but I didn't want to go to another firm. I left my first firm because of leadership changes.
Hmm.
And I was not ready to leave that firm. I would have loved to stay and keep doing the work and exploring. It felt like a playground to me. And it was with a heavy heart that I left because I thought I was going to end up in an engineering firm in the Denver Tech Center where, first I would have this horrible commute every day, and then I would be locked into a much more rigid type of role than you find in law firms because law firms aren't organized like other corporations. And
Yeah.
so,
I mean,
so
literally
you,
different every day.
yeah, you have this element of chaos and disorganization on the one hand, but this freedom and creativity on the other to make the things that you think are needed. So I guess I'm sorry I'm not speaking to
No, I
your
love that because you
prompt,
said
but
something that I never thought about for you, that you find yourself, so in one breath you said I'm risk adverse,
yeah,
but then you also wanted to leave a place
yeah,
because
yeah.
they were never going to let you fail. There was no risk.
Yeah, so I guess the stakes had to finally feel high enough for me. I was bored and
That's it.
I didn't want it to turn toxic, right? You don't want that boredom to turn necrotic in the ecosystem around you because when you're burnt out and you're understimulated, just collecting a paycheck wasn't going to be enough. And so I had to acknowledge that I needed to make a change. I was bored. I was also burn out on certain parts of the job that were never going to go away. It was a
Yeah.
small team. There were four of us. I was always going to roll up my sleeves and be the backup proposal writer when our writer went on vacation or was maxed out. And I was done. If I never did another RFP response, it would be too soon. And it was really uncomfortable. We solved a staffing problem that had challenged me for over 2 years. And as soon as I had the right person in place, my meter started. I'm like, okay, I got to be the next one to give notice because if anybody else announces their intent to leave before I can, I'm too loyal and I wouldn't leave the firm under duress, but I would be miserable. And my wife was talking to me about it. She's like, while I was backfilling for a missing role, she was like, I haven't seen you like this in a long time, you know? And so that was really instructive to us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure just like you saw her being so miserable earlier in her career when she was
Yeah.
in a toxic environment, for
Yeah.
her to see you just not uninspired when you've been inspired.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And when you think about the direction of a career and running circles around the ladder,
Yeah.
I think chasing inspiration is a great way to think about my
Yeah.
and my title now is Chief Inspiration Officer. And it wasn't I didn't know that when I launched my business. It was founder and principal when I launched my business, but that never explained what I did to people. So it was only as I came up on the first anniversary of the business that I realized I am inspiring people to think differently about how they work, about how they provide service, about how they lead, and about how they develop business. And that's really exciting. And that's when I figured out what my title, I needed a year in the role before I knew what my title really was.
Yeah.
And that's you think about it as a series of happy accidents. And you said something in the setup that your career is only, there's only a through line after you reach a certain point. And I think that's really true. And for the record, when I was getting ready to leave my law firm, it wasn't to start my own business, right? You also mentioned that this hasn't been a straight line.
Yeah.
I never, it's worth saying, I never wanted to be a CMO. I was never hungry for the title. I never wanted to go to an AmLaw 100 firm and do that big job. That was never what interested me, and that was another part of why what I'm doing now made a lot of sense. The grass wasn't greener at other firms. I didn't want the bigger job. I didn't want to manage more people and bigger budgets. If anything, I wanted to shrink back down after managing people and budgets and really immerse myself in passion projects. Um, and I found, I had a big recruiting season and I heard from several big law firms, and that was always exciting. But after I would talk my wife's ear off the night after a phone call, I would get up the next morning and go, but I don't want to do that job,
Yeah.
right? That's not the move for me. And so what was, I was preparing to leave my law firm to join another agency. And that was exciting and new and different. And that satisfied the challenge of the grass is not greener at another law firm. But here for me, and when that agency approached me in the first place, I laughed them off and told them no thanks. And it took a lot of conversation with them. And I had to go back to them at one point and go, you know what? I am interested in revisiting this because some point along the way I remembered, wait a minute, I did go into business for myself once before.
Yeah.
And it worked really well. And I really liked it. And I only ended up in these law firm marketing departments because I had to for my family. So who's to say I can't explore that? And who's to say we can't take that financial leap again and have that satisfaction? That was eye-opening. And the only reason I didn't go to that agency was because of a hiccup in the timing
Hmm.
for them. And they said, we still want to do all the things we're talking about. We hope you can be patient. And I was like, I gotta go. I can't be
Yeah.
patient. And that was when I realized, wait a minute, by accident, in preparing to go to the agency and support them, I've already made my business plan, right? Like I know what I'm going to do for them I know how I'm going to fit in with them, and I know what I'm going to do that they're not already doing as a compliment. I also, we had figured out the finances on the family to make that change. So I was like, it was a happy accident. I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. Maybe all I need to do is change the name and the framing, and I'm ready to go into business for myself. And it was a revelation.
And you had created the business plan for it and the path for it just without even knowing, maybe without consciously knowing that it was actually
Bingo.
for you.
Bingo, without consciously knowing. And here's the thing that's counterintuitive. And my wife and I have talked about this more than once because I am so risk averse and I am not a gambler. By the time I was feeling comfortable taking that step, we knew this thing had legs because it was highly unlikely that I was just going to go out on a lark and walk away from a law firm job and the security and just try this thing. It was like, oh no, all the pieces are together. I've been an independent business owner before. I've really studied. I've got 14 years inside law firms, so I know what I'm thinking about. I know what I'm talking about with this audience. I'm speaking to the audiences in a way that the market is not currently, right? And so everything came together, and I'm like, okay, I better go find a name. and build the platform. That's all. And my wife, bless her heart, when I told her all this, and I said, I think I could go into business for myself. And she had even encouraged me at one point earlier to do that. Bless her heart, she goes, okay, I hear you. Show me the business plan. Like now she's in skeptic mode and now she wants to kick the tires after being the biggest cheerleader for me. So very funny.
So, do you think that maybe people are more prepared for a transition like this than they realize? Like maybe they've been doing all of the work in the background in their minds. It's just kind of like marinating back there.
That's a fantastic question. That's a really great question. Yes, I 100% think that. That has been my experience. When I coach and train marketing and BD teams to lead lawyers, not just to serve lawyers, but to lead
Mhm.
lawyers, what they discover is that with a little bit of naming and framing, they are more ready than they realized to do that. They know more. They just didn't have the means to contextualize it and make it, this is business jargon, but make it operational inside a law firm in a way that they could have confidence. Wait, I do know what I'm talking about, and I understand the importance of leading us forward here. Instead of getting into conflict with lawyers, which is what's so easy, right? Same side, when I work with lawyers about business development training and coaching, the relief on their faces when working together, they discovered that they know how to do business development. They just didn't know they knew. And they don't have to follow that person's
Yeah.
formula. There's a pattern that works for them, and we can uncover that together. The relief they feel when they realize they don't have to be somebody they don't identify with is palpable. And I see it again and again and again. The way you ask the question, 100%, people are more prepared than they realize to take these what feel like massive
Huge.
leaps or
Yeah.
insurmountable steps, and yet they just need the guidance and the circumstances to come together to show them that they've been doing a lot of the foundational work all along and didn't know it. I
Yeah. And
love the
maybe
question.
maybe a reframing of it. They just
Yeah.
need reframing. I
Well,
when
go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say when I work with lawyers and I hear frequently, and I'm sure you hear the same thing. It just I don't like marketing. It feels icky. It doesn't feel natural. I don't feel like
Right.
my authentic self. And I reframe it for them as helping. You have a skill
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
People out there need your skills. So you are just helping them understand and helping them realize that you are here. That's it.
Yeah. That's 100% right. And one of the ways that one of the biggest pieces of market feedback I've gotten since I launched my business is when I talk to marketing and BD folks about trainings that I do, or when I run the trainings, invariably we get to this unit called critical thinking as client service, and it investigates order taker traps that we all fall into and how we inadvertently reinforce, lawyers' ideas that they're the problem solvers, and they call us when they've solved the problem,
Hmm.
and we execute. Not they call us when they identify an opportunity, or they want to explore, or they want to problem solve together. When people hear the order taker traps, they see the order taker traps, when they understand there are ways to disrupt this order taker cycle, they, I invariably get, I have felt this before, but I've never been able to articulate it,
Yeah.
and it's that same naming and framing and realizing that they can build a whole structure around this thing that they've been experiencing without being able to
Yeah.
name. And that's incredibly empowering.
Yeah. Let's, by the way, please tell tell everybody what you do because I know what you do. I think it's fantastic. But I realize that like I know, but we're kind of making a leap here that other people might not. So just give me a description.
Yeah, thanks for asking. The number one thing I do is I train marketing and BD professionals to lead and serve lawyers through knowledge, empathy, and confidence. When we build our as service professionals, when we engage with our internal clients, the lawyers, through those three cornerstones, knowledge, empathy, and confidence, we can approach client service in a way that is not reactive, and we are not order takers. we can play on the real strengths. I think you see a lot of, is marketing art or is it science? Is business development art or science? And the answer is it depends. And when we get into moments of conflict or challenge with lawyers, when we're tested on these things, we often back down because we feel the answers. We don't know how to express the answers.
Yeah.
And so much in every law firm environment, there's so much experimental work happening based on culture, comp structures, governance systems, the way things have to happen because of the business entity. So even if you've been doing it in multiple environments, you get into the environment you're in and it's different, and we get there by feel. And so instead of being on our heels, we can really lean into the knowledge that we do bring. We can bring empathy for lawyers, and that's important in two ways because it's easy to feel put out ourselves and then constantly feel on the brink of burnout. And when we pause to feel empathy for the lawyers and realize that they don't have all the answers and they may not be living the charmed life, and just because there is a power dynamic in law firms that suggests that they are at the top of the pecking order and we are not, that doesn't mean that they feel like they are, even when they project that way. And when you can tap into empathy in serving, in reacting, preparing to engage with lawyers, reacting to lawyers, and thinking about how to lead lawyers, it really goes a long way to serving lawyers. The other thing it does is it protects marketers against feeling victimized. It's hard to feel victimized by someone you pity. And if you can look at a lawyer for a minute and go, I've seen behind the curtain and I understand the pressures you're dealing with, and that sounds awful, then we can stop a little bit. And it doesn't excuse bad behavior. It doesn't excuse mistreatment or disrespect, which I know marketers run into all the time, marketing and BD professionals. But it does help us insulate ourselves in a way against that mistreatment and go, those guys don't even know if they like what they've signed up for.
Yeah.
Right? That's not
It's true.
always the case, but there's plenty of it. And that's not coming through. Or those guys have kids who are struggling right now, just like I do, right? Or those guys are sandwiched between their kids and their aging parents.
Yeah.
And I've caught them on a bad day and they just got an adverse ruling, and the client just complained to the relationship partner, whatever it is, right? So we tend to build them up in ways that don't apply. They're humans.
Yep.
And it's easy to forget that under the immense pressure of our task lists. And it's through those and choosing the language of service that we use and choosing how we show up in our roles that allows us to lead lawyers with confidence. So I train about all of this. I've built a program called Accelerator Training, which is a basic curriculum that speaks to all of these issues. It's very fun. It's very interactive. I love the feedback I've been getting for almost 2 years on it now. I was just trying to tally it this morning. I think I'm at between law firms that have hired me and people who have come to cohort trainings from law firms. I believe I've got representatives from well over 2 dozen firms across
Oh,
the everything from 60 lawyer firm to 1,000 lawyer firm that have participated in these trainings. But that's the
yeah.
biggest, proudest part of what I'm doing.
So when you went from working inside a firm to building your own business that works with law firms, what are some things that you had to learn really quickly for yourself?
That's a good question. I think that the number one thing I had to learn, and I always trained lawyers on this, but that clients can smell fear and desperation from a mile away, from 10 miles away, right? And this is something, and David Ackert said this to me, and I credit David with this because he challenged me that I was too tentative. And I have a really experimental mindset. I'm really inquisitive. And I'm maybe deferential to a fault at times. I don't want to, I make a lot of assumptions and I don't suffer for self-esteem, but I wanted to know that people found value in what I was doing before I told the market that people found value. And David, and he said it in his own way, but he gave me he gave me a lot to think on and just encouraged me to revisit my approach in talking about things because I was too tentative to speak to law firms. And that's something I have trained lawyers on before, but I need to really appreciate that. People need to feel the excitement. They need to feel the bravado may not be the right word, but in law firms, bravado is a part of what
Mhm.
everybody is showing up with, and you know that's part of the struggles that I think different lawyers feel like is I don't show up with swagger. That's not my style, and yet go back to that idea of like we look for certain indicators in people in legal and in law firms, we look for swagger. We're trained to look for bravado. We're like it's part of the it's part of the
Yeah.
lore. So that was probably the biggest thing I had to learn fastest.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm coming to the end of my questions now. One, I feel like we already answered, so I don't want to go into that. It was more about like why people feel that they were behind, but I feel like we covered that pretty well earlier on in our conversation. But my question for you is if somebody feels that their path doesn't make sense yet, like they are on this series of happy accidents, but maybe they're not feeling it. What would you want them to hear, having traveled that road?
You, you know, I would ask what fills you up because work is draining, no matter how you slice it. I work for myself and it's exhausting, right? Like, not every day is sunshine and roses, and I have all the autonomy I could want. And yet, some days it is pure effort, it's not joy. And so I would really ask the question, what fills you up? If you're in this series of happy accidents, but you haven't quite found the fit, what are the things that give you energy?
Hmm.
And where can you find work that that specifically calls for you to spend more of your time on those things that give you energy? Because I think that holds more of the key than getting to a certain type of place or getting a certain title or anything like that. And that we tell ourselves, well, maybe this next firm is the place where I'll be appreciated or where I'll find that fit. Or maybe I need the title in order to do the tasks. And I'm not sure I would investigate that a little bit
Yeah.
further.
Yeah, I agree.
And really I would interview my own assumptions and I would interview future employers with that idea of what are you really going to have me doing and is it going to fill me up? What do you really need? And does what you really need match what fills me up? That's the way to think about
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. And especially when I talk to people now who are looking for jobs, I always say, remember, this is your life. For the organization that you're going to, that you're thinking about working with, it's the organization. But for you, this is your life. This is your day to day. It's a huge portion of your waking hours. So make sure that you are interviewing the organization even more than they are interviewing you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. I was just thinking something. I heard this interview on NPR with this artist the other day, and it comes to mind because I told you early on, I thought I was going to be a poet and a novelist, and I didn't even care if I was like success. Like I wanted to continue to be able to patch together a writing life. That was enough for me. This artist said, he said it was actually, I forget what the interviewer's question was, but he said it was actually very easy to commit to a life as an artist once I realized that being an artist meant I would never be rich. I had to give up my notion of what income would look like and what lifestyle would look like in order to pursue this path
Hmm.
as an artist. And I looked at that and that was a comfortable decision for me to make, but I had to recognize it before I could make that decision. I think that's another big part of it is if you're not finding the fit, then ask the question, am I prioritizing right to begin with is my
Yeah.
framing, right? From my family, look, here's where I ended up. I wanted to be a poet and novelist, and yet I had to go get a corporate job and bring benefits home so that my wife wouldn't be in a toxic job. And now she brings home the benefits while I pursue this, right? So we trade, we take
Yeah.
turns.
Yep. So has your family stopped worrying about you yet?
Um, that's a good question. I think so. I think so. I think I think they're getting there.
They're getting there.
So
They're feeling a little bit more comfortable.
they sure appreciate my wife. So
Oh, good.
and she is not my caretaker. She did not rescue me, but we are good for each other.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like
so
I want to meet your wife and interview her
oh,
on Around the Ladder.
you should. You
I
should.
really should.
She has not had a career. She was on a career path and she woke up one morning and said, "Wait, I can't take this job. I was going to go to Antarctica." And then she walked away from a job opportunity and went to Antarctica and we met there.
Okay. After this, make an introduction for me because I
Okay.
would love to meet her.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Done. You're
Matt,
welcome. Thank you. This has been so fun.
I loved this. I think that your story is a really good reminder that not every path is going to make sense while you're in it, but it doesn't mean that you're off track. Sometimes things that feel disconnected or random end up being the most valuable things for you later on, right?
Yeah,
So,
100%.
yes. Well, thank you for joining us on Around the Ladder, where we are figuring out what it actually looks like to build a path that fits you. And if you enjoyed hearing Matt's story, please share the episode with others. Thank you for listening, and I hope we'll see you back again.